Okay, sweet. Just sort of jumping into the charts. It's 11. Nothing too substantial to sort of report sort of straight off the bat with Asia Open. We did get the breakout on Aussie last night, so we were sort of drifting up, obviously sort of through most of Asia, just dead through Europe, and of course it is, isn't it? I mean, it's Aussie US, but you started to sort of form this bit of a sort of head and shoulders on the lower time frame. Um, so where we are here, we got the sort of bit of a shoulder happening here, a bit of a shoulder happening here, and of course, head down the bottom there. So a measured move with the break of this, like these were the zones that I was saying that we needed to get above yesterday. So this first one here, which was sort of first sort of struggling with a little bit, this is the NFP lows. If we drag it back over here, you can see it sort of broke through, hit those Friday wick highs, and really had a lot of trouble sort of getting through here. This is just grinding, attempted a few times, subsequently sort of came back. You got the back test of that sort of zone that we marked out for the NFP lows. Also, this sort of falling resistance from those wicks on Friday sort of carried through, has also provided a bit of a confluence with the back test of that top there, and you can see prices just exploded off from that zone. So coming through the neckline here, we can call this a bit of a breakout, certainly, and then we can start to look for these measured moves. So measured move on this particular sort of inverted head and shoulders. As you can see, I've dragged it out here, copied it up over the top over here. Comes pretty much smack bang straight up on that 61% fib retracement line. And so what we like to look for these things is we get the breakout, we get the back test, which you can see just here. Where we go. So this is your breakout here. This is your back test. Now we want that subsequent higher high, which it looks like it's actually sort of pushing for now. If we sort of just put this tiny little zone across the top here, above here, I would say this is a good confirmation that we're starting to sort of shore up this trend a little bit. And then we can start to look for these price levels up above as well. And this is what I was saying yesterday with the with the break of this zone. This is what I was looking for. This is where we had the alert. And I said, look, we've got these lows over here. These sort of things that we've still got to contend with. Not so much these ones here. This was a bit more of a swing low. This is after last week's open and then sort of subsequent sort of pullback. So these obviously have sort of been sort of a bit of a issue at first here, but we're starting to see here we've got the breakout, we've got a higher low. This will make it a higher high if we can get back above this 63 sort of 50 zone, just to sort of confirm it. And obviously with these things, you want to close above the zone. Once we close above there, then obviously that's a bit more of a confirmation. I mean, all these things can always reverse, of course, but when we get a close above that particular zone, we can sort of say with a higher certainty that either the sellers, buyers, depending on what direction we're going. In this case, obviously it's the sellers. We can say that the sellers are depleted from this zone here, because at the moment we can see sellers came here, buyers are obviously back here, support resistance, the same thing, pushing back up here. Once we go through here, we can say, okay, this level is gone, and then you can start to sort of look for where you might sort of be able to sort of connect a couple of these lines. You can start to look for where the channels might be. This is a bit of a steep angle, so I'd be surprised if you sort of continued on something so much like this, but you could be looking at something potentially grinding up along like this. And these ways we can sort of like see, okay, where can we see other confluences? Where can we see other areas, whether on a higher time frame, or obviously similar time frames where we can see that previously we've had sellers or buyers, and we know they're those points of interest, so the supports and the resistance zones. So first thing right now is to sort of keep pushing through here. We're at 63.42. We've also got RBA minutes coming up. So we've got to sort of see how that is going to play into things and how that's going to affect Aussie as well. But at the moment, it's looking like it does want to sort of try and push up for a little bit of a continuation. Of course, we need these confirmations, but a measured move will take you back up to 63.75. 61% is always going to be a bit of a strong sort of resistance or support, depending on obviously which direction you're going. And then above that, then we can start to look at these sort of lows where we sort of, oh, where are we going? these sort of lows here. So these again, I think sort of if we can get above the 61, we're going to start to find some issues when we come into contact. Firstly, with this falling resistance that we've seen come through here a couple of times, a connection with that. Plus, then you've got this confluence here where we've seen that the sellers were previously. We broke through, they became buyers, and then obviously when they gave it up, they just really gave it up and sort of came back down. So again, this is going to be the point where I can, above sort of 63.90. 90s are always, it doesn't matter what cent you're going through with Aussie. 90s, particularly 91, 92, I find a really strong support resistances. It always overshoots the handle, and it's always a good pickup if you're trying to sort of get long on a move down with the Aussie and that. So around those sort of 91, 92s seem to just work time and time again. But as much as they work for support, they work for resistance as well. So I expect topside 90 is going to certainly see a little bit more of a higher time frame, deeper sort of pullback if we can get up there. Of course, first price target is this 61% retracement of this drop from Thursday. Yeah, it must have been Thursday. But then if we can get above this falling resistance, above this horizontal, which I'm kind of say this is going to be a bit of a sort of bit of an effort to do, then it's starting to look quite healthy. And you're looking back up at this attempt at these 64.30 zones. I mean, this is obviously 90 points, 100 points off, which for Aussie is a big move. But if we flip it onto the daily, these are the areas that I was saying where we're going to have issues coming back into over here, because you can see how many times the daily candles tried to close above here. It hasn't managed. I mean, we got this little one up here, which obviously had a long spike and came back down, but this is why we've got the two levels here. But even if you just get rid of this first one and go for 64.55, that kind of zone, we haven't been able to close above that. For whatever reason, the market or whoever's selling or whoever's pushing it down has said every single time, nah, you can't sort of close above here. So closing above here is going to be a very bullish sign. I mean, maybe getting a little bit ahead of ourselves at the moment because, obviously that's 120 points off. But if we do see a continued sell down with DXY, even coming back to that neckline, that's going to be a broader USD selling off, which, by proxy, Aussie is going to benefit from. So, I could definitely see some more short-term upside with Aussie here. I don't think they're giving up the complete sort of goose here at the moment. I mean, look, RBA minutes are coming out in a few minutes, and maybe sort of like they're going to sort of say that they're not going to be raising rates and they're going to be talking. Well, they're not going to be talking cutting, but that was just an extreme sort of example. So I've just got somebody calling. Cool, and back. Yeah, so obviously that's a bit of an extreme sort of scenario, but point being is that sort of, if USD does start to pair a little bit of its gains over the last 3 months, which is very likely, and it'll flip onto the chart at the moment, does look like it does have at least some short-term downside. Aussie is by proxy going to benefit from this. But, realistically, these first lower levels are what we're looking at intraday. Once you get back above 64, well, then you've got something interesting to look at. But for now, I think it's sort of, first things first, above 63.50. And then I would say we're looking for another 25-point move on top of that to that 63.75. All right, and across to gold. Gold played out beautifully yesterday. I thought we would have got a little bit of a deeper pullback. I wanted to get around, and I still do want to get around that sort of 1890s to 1900 zone. Like the bounce here was a very V-shape recovery. It seems to have sort of plateaued a little bit, but as I always sort of say, that Ages sessions, really nothing for gold. I give it about a $5 range at best. So you want to sort of see this continue to sort of kick on, take out these little highs here. So if we sort of put a little intraday sort of level here, you could call lower support in this zone here. And of course, then if we drag this down here, this is where we had sort of overnight lows coming down to sort of 1909. So again, as you can see it here, it's pretty flat. Above 22 with the close up here, then we can go to look retest Friday's highs. So up around that sort of 32 zone. Below sort of 14, I would say a quick move down to that 1909. I expect this to hold at least for one effort. I don't expect this to just melt straight down. If we are to sort of get down to these lower levels, which is obviously sort of what I'm looking to buy from, where we at, the little thing, I imagine sort of like something like this, maybe find some little support here, bounce. If it can retest, break through, then you've got your lower low and lower. This is obviously just on the 1 hour, so this is a low time frame move. Back down here for a lower low, quick move down here, support. I imagine this to sort of come back up. You've just got this little bit of a range through here, and then as to sort of what it does from here, it could just bounce back up, and then you could find that this is actually the higher range move that is going between 22 and 09. So that's a $10 range for it all. Again, it's one of those things. If we can then sort of retest these lows, which were the lows from overnight, and if it does close down under that, like break it and then obviously close down under, you don't want a wick under it. If we have a wick, well, obviously that means that we know buyers from last night are happy to keen to get back on board around this zone. And given the sort of fundamental nature of everything happening, nothing's changed. So I still am sort of overall bullish on gold and metals in general, at least in the sort of medium term. But sort of like nothing's changed. So we know that the buyers are there, though. If we can close down under this zone, that would mean that there'd be either sort of like drop down to sort of like, okay, where else can they get it a little bit cheaper to then push it back up? And this is where I'm going to be hanging around as well. I'm going to be around in this 1900 zone, which I've got marked out previously. Obviously, they were resistance. I just haven't updated these charts, but you can see there was a little bit of sort of action sort of coming around these places previously. Sort of obviously swing lows here. 1900 is obviously a big sort of round number as well, so people like round numbers, big 1900 handle. And you can see that price is sort of like fluffed around here. Underneath 1895, it was a fairly straight shot down. So I think 1890s would be an ideal level to get, but I'll start scaling in from 1900 or probably 1902, just to be, you know, not completely sort of waiting for the golden thing and then missing the whole lot. But this is what I'm still expecting from gold to sort of come down here. With this kind of scenario, depending on how long this grinds sideways, you're going to be looking for this kind of almost flag pattern that will be breaking out. And as you can see, I mean, obviously this is fictional sort of price action, these doof here. But something along these lines is what I'm looking for to get there. And then once we've sort of shored up these levels and we've got a bit of a flag situation happening, then we can start to draw up some breakout levels where we're going to say, okay, yes, it's coming out of this pullback, and where's it going to go to after that? And then if we do have something along these lines, this will be your sort of pole, whatever you want to call it. And then we can go up here and we can say, okay, where's that next level going to be? And this is the kind of sort of scenario I'm looking at for gold. I think deeper pullback, if I can get it around 1900, we can see a big push on there. Anything can happen with this. As I said, I think it's more the safe haven of choice in that. Gold's been running up for 3 months. I don't think the risk reward is there. That's why you've been seeing the Swiss franc sort of appreciate a little bit. That's why you've seen gold really hammer to the top side last week. Yen has done a little bit better. I haven't actually been looking so closely at a lot of the yen pairs, but these are the other sort of typical safe havens. And while USD has sort of just had 3 months of already very solid gains, you know, the risk reward isn't so much there for it all. Whereas if you're buying these other assets, gold has just been obliterated, particularly in the last couple of weeks, not including last week, of course. And then sort of, you know, yen just, I mean, the BOJ's just out of touch with everything in that. And of course, the yen's just been hammered for, you know, year and a half or something like this at least. So yeah, I think there's sort of certainly more upside to come with gold and metals. I'd just like to get it from a lower level. Okay, DXY. We're seeing this falling, what was previously falling resistance has now sort of played up twice, held up twice, as its support. So obviously, sort of as it's coming down here, we're seeing the buyers or whoever's sort of moving this market is certainly sort of respecting this line down here. This is the wicks yesterday that I wanted to get underneath. So we can drag this just off to the side here. These were the wicks I wanted to get underneath. Obviously, you can see sort of through the end of Asia session, it did, sorry, end of sort of US session, it did eventually sort of pop and push down there. It's got a little bit of a gap up this morning, but it's looking like it's just being sold straight into. So, you know, if till we can get underneath the lows from last night, well, sort of the US session here, there's a chance that we could get a little bit more of a rally and a push to the top side here. But, you know, we're just going to have to wait and see. I found DXY more often than not will sort of follow its direction of gap. As you can see, this is yesterday's open. And this is what I was saying when it gapped down. Came back up here. Depending on where you want it, what time frame you're trading, you can say that it kind of closed the gap from the wicks to the wicks. I like the close levels to sort of say that that gap's fully closed. You can say there's a crossover here, but realistically, I think it's got a little bit of a gap that it's left up around there. But if we're having a look on this daily here, this is what we were looking for all along. Sort of like we were saying, as it was coming into this zone down over here, we needed this next second drive, because this second drive here is what's telling us how strong the market is. This can still this isn't necessarily done. I mean, certainly it's not looking good for US dollar in terms of this upward momentum. I mean, you've had a sort of bit of a doji daily, and then you've sort of come down, closed on the lows underneath that wick. So, you know, from a straightforward technical sort of look on a daily, this is moving back down now. This is just, here's your flare up, and bang, it's come back down. And this is what I was saying. You need these second pushes up, because these second pushes up are the ones that are going to sort of tell you, okay, have we got a double top? Have we got a higher high? Or have we got a lower high? So as it is right now, of course, you can see here's your high, your low, this high, and it's lower than this one. So we've got a lower high, and now we've pushed down. The big test now is to see, do we get, it's the same thing in the opposite direction. Do we get lower low? Do we get a double bottom on this push here and sort of come back up? And what's the sort of thing here? Do we get this sort of thing? We've got a low, push up, bang. Do we go double bottom, or do we push down and put in a lower low? Or do we push back up, as I said, with the double bottom and do a range? This is what I've been leaning, the scenario I've been leaning towards, this sort of range play. But of course, you know, if we can come back down here and test this bottom here, well, we've got the price target set up for where we want to go if this does give way. It's not going to be a straight shot down. These things never are, because as you can see, you know, buys were here, buys were here, buys were here. There's a lot of levels to sort of get through, and you can expect as these come across here, there's going to be portions of the market that say, hey, look, you know what, I've seen these before, I've seen these before. You know, they're going to try their hand at these things. So as it sort of comes down, what we're going to be sort of looking for some sort of scenario. This is in the case that we get this sort of down bounces, which it has now. If it can come back down here and break through here, you know, we're going to see little bounces here. These lower levels aren't going to be as strong as these big ones over here, and also these big ones over here. But these can provide those little areas where you see short-term rallies to give those back tests of the underside of the sort of support and the level. If that can break there, and then this is the same opposite of what we're looking for Aussie now. You don't look for necessarily the one break and then it just melts down. You want the small break, back test here, and then when we go through this smaller sort of low, that's when we confirm that this is actually a larger move and he's coming back down to this side over here. So certainly, as I said, I am sort of thinking that these kind of moves and the price action we've seen around sort of DXY more recently is showing that we are having some cracks starting to show with the US dollar. I just think after sort of so many confluences, we had this sort of big sort of negative divergence coming up to the top up here. We had the weekly resistance levels where we know that the sellers have been previously, and now we're starting to see these deeper pullbacks, lower lows, lower highs. These kind of things are really going to start to say, okay, well, maybe so there's a lot of profit on the table for people that have been long for the last 3 months through this run up here. You know, do they want to book some of their profit, or do they want to sort of hold on and they're going to be going further up here? And this is why we need to get this break of this zone here. It's really going to tell us sort of where we're going. I think sort of like it's nice to sort of speculate. It could be doing this, could be doing that, but realistically, I think under sort of that 105.60 to sort of call it that kind of zone there, or above 107.40, these kind of levels. Once we break these zones, then I think we're going to have a bit more of a sort of move to either the downside, or of course we've got a price target of a range play to the top side here as well. But I'm still leaning towards a little bit more of USD selling off, and that even despite everything happening with the Middle East situation at the moment. If we flip across, and again, China just grinding, absolutely grinding sideways. As I keep saying every time, you know, these are my sort of price targets here. I think once we sort of come back to this sort of large sort of rising support, I think we're going to see some action here. The longer we wait with this, though, the higher this gets to sort of get a bit of a reaction. So it'll be interesting what happens if this just continues to grind sideways for a bit. But this head and shoulders, I don't want to call it invalid, but this right shoulder here is, you know, a lot bigger than that left one. But you know, we've had a bit of a push up. We can say it's trying to sort of hold this sort of falling resistance here. I think if we can sort of get back up above this sort of 73.30, so 73.30, 73.30, I don't know. There's so many numbers with this one, but above these previous highs, let's call it that, above these ones here. Then obviously on the cards is the major test up here, which, as we said previously, this is where the PBOC came in and just dumped a bunch of USD on the market. So they're happy to sell at this zone here. So it depends who anybody wants to go up against that. You've obviously got to be pretty ballsy with it all. So we'll sort of see what happens with them there. And finally, quickly, copper, because we got the minutes coming out in a minute with Aussie and the RBA. And you can see that it's starting to hold this little area here. We had the negative divergence. It's starting to push up. We're getting the RSI coming up on a steeper little angle here. So this isn't a confirmed line or anything as of right now, but here's one push down. We've got a higher high and we've got a higher high on the RSI. So, you know, there's a good chance here that if we can see some continuation, take out yesterday's wicks. Look at all these top wicks here. You've got a lot of sellers that are pushing down, but, you know, once you can sort of deplete these top wicks and we can get a close on the highs, then we're going to be looking back up along this sort of higher time frame, sort of falling resistance here. So I would say this is a fairly decent sort of copper short-term sort of target for where we might sort of see the sellers come back in. If we can get above this zone here, this sort of 370 level. Above this sort of horizontal resistance here, and I think we could sort of start to see a bit of a range play, but this horizontal levels start to seem like they're sort of playing a bit of a stronger role. This triangle just built for ages. It broke down, but it hasn't melted down afterwards. So it's interesting to sort of see, again, if we can break this horizontal down the bottom here, 340 is the price target for the downside, which is a fairly substantial drop off, but I still think, and if we go into the 4 hour, we could see a little bit more of a potential upside, at least in the short term with copper. So we'll have to sort of see how that goes. Cool, and that's about it from me.